Hey crew, welcome to Meaningful Curriculum for Young Children, Chapter 1. All right, so here we go. Hope you have your textbook because this is not quite a read-along, but you really need to read the textbook and skim through the chapters and understand the content. And skimming and reading, I know, are two different things, but one of the strategies that I try to encourage my students with is when you open a textbook, it's like what we do with young children. This is the front of the book, this is the back of the book, this is the spine, and the title page. For the title page for you guys is like the table of contents. Skim through the table of contents, get an overall view of what you're going to be learning throughout the semester in whatever class you're taking with your textbook. Then when you get to the chapter, always read the chapter summary. It gets your brain engaged of where you're supposed to be headed in your learning. The other thing to do is to go to the end of the chapter of any textbook and look at the discussion questions. I wonder why that would be. Let's see, homework assignments, quizzes, tests, again, in any class. These are things you want to follow through with. Then, as you read the textbook, you can look at the bold print at the top of each section. And each section will say, this is what the topic is going to be about. Usually the opening paragraph discusses what is the main topic. The middle paragraph talks about examples and specific, and then the last paragraph ties it up as a summary. Okay? And so if you really understand a content, maybe this first chapter and you've been doing this field for a long time and you're like, oh, I totally understand this. I'm just going to skim through this to make sure that what I know is consistent with the current research and data and things like that, right? And now you don't have to read forward every single thing. So if you want more information on that, let me know and I'll send that to you guys. All right, and we're off like a shot. So generally, we're going to talk about what is curriculum, what is pedagogy, what does that mean, what is in other words, how do you teach? It's that personal educational philosophy. Why do children learn the way that they do? How are you going to, what is your modality of teaching children? Is it play? Is it worksheets? Is it a combination? Is it Montessori? Is it Reggio Emilia? Is it high scope? Creative curriculum, Frog Street, all of these different things that we purchase that's considered curricula. We're going to talk about, does what you believe match with where you work or where you want to work? And is that the best philosophy for children to learn based on current research? Okay. And overall, learning should be fun and joyful. It just should be. And I know sometimes watching webinars and classes and stuff is not always the most exciting thing, but we're going to try to make it fun. Okay. All right. So curriculum as a whole, I kind of make it like a house. The foundation of the house is developmental milestones. You have to understand the developmental milestones. The walls around the house, the framework, is the curriculum and the environment. And then the roof that kind of holds it all together underneath is your teachers, caregivers, and families. So if you can kind of build a house out of that, and I like a visual picture because I'm a visual learner, hence why there's triangles and circles on the page here. But the foundation, like a rectangle foundation, is understanding the development of whatever age child you're working with, right? And then the framework, the square, is that classroom, is that teaching environment, it's that curriculum you're going to use. And then everything inside of that, you know, where you put a learning center, what materials you use, or what philosophy you use, that's within that box. And then the triangle roof at the top is the people that support over all of that. Your teachers, your directors, your owners, your support staff, your trainings, your families, things like that, okay? So it's a combination. Curriculum as a whole is a combination of theory and practice. So theory is an idea that somebody had that says we have data to support our belief system. Now, here's the thing about a theory. A theory can wibble wobble, right? It can go side to side because somebody's theory here may not match somebody's theory here. And let me give you an example of this. Let's go back to child development, like 101. If you took CHD 1220, which is a child development class for your CDA or FCCPC, Chapter 2 is all about theorists. And there's two in particular. There is Sigmund Freud, which is the psychosexual theory, then a friend of his who created the psychosocial, which was Erik Erikson, right? And so you have theorists that were friends. Erikson learned under Freud. They were going to work together, and Erikson said there's gotta be more than the sexuality or sexual urges in human life to get people to go where they are, right? From infancy on up. And so he took a lot of the theory from Freud and built it into the 8 stages of social emotional belief system. And that has been followed and set for a really long time. And then people took that and created an additional theory. So theories wibble wobble. The data is sound at the time that the theory is created, or we wouldn't be putting them in books, right? But as we learn more about the brain, as we learn more about human behavior, then we have to combine the theory with the practice, the actual doing of whatever it is that we're doing. So what we were doing with children in the 1800s is pretty different from what we're doing now in many aspects. Play has always been around, but how we play has differed, right? Schooling has been around since Socrates and Plato, the great philosophers, but how we teach people is different now, and how people absorb and learn and comprehend material we've learned is different. Not everybody learns the same way. So it's a combination of what you know in theory, which is child development and your developmental theorists. So go back to chapter 2 of CHD 1220, get the book out and take a look at that chapter. If you haven't had that class yet and you're interested in learning more about the theorists that you really need to know in our industry, if you want to be high quality, email me at jperry@irsc.edu and I'll help you there. All right. So theory and practice, and then support and curriculum content. Like once you understand what the curriculum is that you're going to use, you have to know what's inside that box. And how do you create teaching strategies? How do you create assessments and screeners and observing behavior and documentation on all of that stuff, okay? And we have to do all of this in like 7 weeks, and people have been doing this for like 700 years. So this is really a global foundational understanding of curriculum. People go for their doctorate degrees in curriculum development. So this is really just to whet your appetite a little bit as to why we do what we do, and then really to bring it into your classrooms. Like, I need to know what to do with this group of 4-year-olds. This is my first year teaching, and I'm just like, they gave me 20 kids, 4-year-olds by myself, and I'm stressing out. Or I've been doing this 12 years, and I'm just really getting bored in the field. It feels like I'm just in a rut, and I could use some refresher and some innovation and some inspiration. So that's kind of where we're headed on this. So there's a thought that we planned the curriculum, designed by a teacher using what they know about early education. That's the developmental milestones, that's understanding the behavior of children. And guys, you're not rocket science. You could have a really good year one year where every kid was like, oh, this is great. And then you can have a year where you have that kid like times 6. Especially now, we have a lot of kids that are what are called fear-based living or anxiety. And I don't want to speak that into anybody's life, but I'm just acknowledging that it exists. And so when we have a curriculum, I promise you, you could have the best laid plans ever, and some kid will throw a monkey wrench, or the whole class will throw a monkey wrench, and you're like, well, it looked good on paper, but it's, we're just not going to do this today. And instead of beating your children up for not doing something, do what we're supposed to do. Follow the child's lead. Do you remember the song? We're following the leader, the leader, the leader. We're following the leader wherever he may go, or she, okay? He or she may go. Guess what? The he or the she in that song is the child, not you. It ain't about you right now. It ain't about you right now, okay? So we want to intentionally design learning experiences to what children know already and what they need to know. And we do that through observation. All right. So we don't have to sit here. One of the burdens that gets to be taken off of us as teachers is you don't have to necessarily teach everything, but you guide and facilitate the learning process by observing children in the play setting. I know, mind-boggling, right? Now that's an educational belief system. You might be of the belief system that no, children should be at desks at age 3. They can have a workbook, they can work in small groups, and they're going to learn content. So my question to that is, however old you are now, think about it. Do you remember the lessons that you were taught when you were 3 or 4, like the specific lesson plans? Or do you remember images about your play experiences? Do you remember feelings about it? See? Hence the homework coming up on early play experiences, right? So these are important to know. So how does early childhood curriculum reflect the ways children learn? That's a really good question. Again, I know you guys can read pretty much through this, but let me touch base on a few things. The primary, #1 way that children learn in early education is through play and sensory exploration. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. You may want to remember that. Through play and exploration. And not just exploration, but sensory. Birth through age 2.5, they only learn using their 5 senses. So let's remind us what the 5 senses are, okay? Touch, taste, smell, hear. What's the last one? You remember? Ooh, that's a good idea. I just had an epiphany. So I'm going to put in the homework assignment, I'm going to give a bonus 5 points. I love doing this. I'm going to mark it right now. A bonus 5 points if you can write down the 5 senses and what age. Haha. Okay, so you're going to write down what are the 5 senses and then what age I just said is the primary learning ages of that. It's going to be like a 5-point bonus, which means you really have to listen to this because if people just scan through this, they're not going to get the bonus points. All right, so moving on. Children learn through play and sensory exploration, and they play with what materials are in their grasp and interest. And through those repeated experiences, gains new knowledge. We call it scaffolding. So think of a construction site that you walk under and it's got these scaffolds, right? And they're painting on the 3rd or 2nd floor of a building, or they're washing windows, and they've got this ladder-like system. It's called a scaffold. And you have to go, you can't just throw the whole, 3-story scaffold up. You have to build from the existing foundation. Well, that's what they do in early education or in all learning, is you take a repeated experience and you build it over time, and then you work with people that are around you to strengthen your understanding of it from relationships, and then you learn the concept. Here's an example. How about a child that learns to walk? Okay, they have a series of things that have to happen, that's called sub-skills, that have to happen before they walk, right? First of all, they have to hold their head up at a few months of age. Then they have to learn to sit up by 4 to 6 months. And then they have to learn to get off their, from their belly and push up. And then they have to, crawl. And then they learn to stand. And then they learn to walk. Guys, all of these things I just said, lifting a head and getting from back to belly and belly to back and learning to sit up. You learn all those things from repeated experience over time with the support of someone there going, look at you, you're sitting up. Aren't you a big kid? Oh my goodness, you took your first steps. You're such a big boy. And I know that sounds silly, but y'all know you do it with the babies, right? So let's say you have a child who's learning to cut with scissors. First, they have to crunch the paper, then they have to tear the paper, and then they have to rip through the paper with the scissors. All of that stuff, that sensory play experience, is a repeated experience over time with support from you as a caregiver, as a mom, as a grandmother, as an Auntie Betty, as an Uncle Bob. It's support from the caring adult, both home and at school. And that's curriculum, guys. It's not necessarily block scheduling of reading, writing, and math. Okay? So where do we get all of these great ideas? All the curriculum is based on the vision of society, values, philosophy, and specifically the views of learners and teachers. That's that educational philosophy again. So all curriculum is based on a vision of society. Now, let's stop there. Remember, society is a culmination of human beings in a designated area that have traditions, cultures, laws, things like that. So our society in America, in United States of America, is different than Central America. It's different than Canada. Our societal belief system is different than India, right? And then within our country, you have a state. The state of Florida has certain values, right? And then in Indian River County or Okeechobee or wherever you're at has a different value. And then your neighborhood even has another set of values. And so when you look at the purchased curriculum that's out there, it covers a global understanding of child development, but it doesn't necessarily hone in on the specificalities of the society and the values and the traditions and the religion and the culture, specifically of the population that you might be serving. And so there is no one curricula. Notice I said curricula because curriculum is one, curricula is more than one. There's no one way to do it all. That's why the state of Florida gives us a vast array to choose from. It might be faith-based, it might be home child care, it might be a large center, it might be a franchise, it might be just one classroom. Okay, so the source of curriculum really comes from looking at the child and what they want to learn, the teacher and how they're going to help that child learn it, and base it also on the society and values and philosophy of the culture they live in. Okay? It's a belief about what is worth knowing. All right? What is worth knowing? Is feeding oneself and taking care of one's body worth knowing? Absolutely. Right? Is learning to read? Absolutely. Is learning to farm and harvest product and crops? Well, it may not be if you live in the city, but it absolutely may be if you live in a very rural agricultural lifestyle. I work with the Seminole tribe of Florida, and while they are just like you and I, their traditions and values are very different. There's a whole alphabet system that they have to learn. There's a whole language outside of the American English that they learn in preschool, because to them, that's the society, that's the traditions and values, and it's worth knowing. All right? Knowing of subject matter, we already talked about number 2 of their developmental learning. Knowing of subject matter is really what interests children and how it's presented, not based on what you always think should be presented. All right, well, you're 2 years old, so we should be learning the 1, 2, 3s now. Their brain doesn't even know what a line is or a circle, let alone what a number is and what it's supposed to do. It's a squiggle line, right? So just because you want them to learn something doesn't always mean that the child that you're working with has the social and emotional maturity to learn it or the cognitive ability to learn it, right? So let me go back to play. I cannot begin to tell you the importance and research-based importance from back in the early 1800s. Friedrich Froebel said play is the highest form of human expression, okay? Or I'm sorry, is the highest expression of human development in childhood. For it alone is the free expression of what is a child's soul or what is a human soul. And I cannot begin to tell you how we've lost play. I just did a training in Panama City where I laid out all of these play spaces. You had a giant area, and I'll share videos if you want, or if you want to see it in action, I'll send you some pictures. And every adult had an opportunity to choose whatever it is they wanted to play with. Now, what was interesting is these were not toys like you get at the store. These were open-ended, meaning there's no product when you build or create or work with this thing, unless you make it that way. It's all process-based. And it was all recyclable materials. Yeah, reusable, recyclable materials. Things that companies would throw away, or pots and pans you have in the kitchen. And I watched people play with this, and I watched how it took them 20 minutes to get into their play. And when I told them it was time to clean up, there was a couple that were like, oh, thank God, because I was getting bored. But there was a lot of people that were like, oh, really? And I even had one lady who was very sad. And I went up and I said, I see that you have some blocks. Tell me what you're working on. And she was just like, this showed me I have forgotten how to play. She was in her 50s. I have forgotten how to play. And she's helping young children learn to play. And I think she works for a coalition, so she works with people who work with providers. She had forgotten how to play. Folks, we can't allow that to happen in the human development, overall span of human development. We cannot forget to play. And I'm not talking some Candy Crush play thing on here. I'm talking learning to play just for the joy and the peace of it all. That's what's really important. So what was life like before kindergarten? Before childhood existed? Well, children were looked at as small adults, mostly because it was a time of survival. Crops had to be planted and harvested. Livestock had to be maintained. Construction work had to be done. Repair things. And a lot of times the children followed in the footsteps of their fathers who had whatever jobs it is, or mothers for homemaking or small businesses. But children worked in mines and factories. And they didn't have birthday parties. And by 7, they were considered adults. And then along came Friedrich Froebel and invented kindergarten in Germany. And he really established that children are children and not many adults. And our children may not be coal mining now, and they may not be working in the fields, although in some countries they do. A lot of countries they do. A lot of countries, young children, I have children that I work with in Uganda, Africa, through what's called the Imani, I-M-A-N-I, the Imani Children's Choir and Education System. And when I visited Uganda, I had an opportunity to spend lots of time with a lot of small kids. And I have pictures of 5-year-olds who are in charge of, completely in charge of, their infant brother or sister for the entire day so mom can work in the fields. Seriously, this was in 2018. This is recent. And when we did our big event, we had a medical clinic We had over 6,000 people come in 5 days. So imagine how many kids followed suit with that we were working with. And these kids had, you know, plastic water bottles as shoes. This is real. They're fitting 12 people in a mud hut. Okay? I mean, this is real life in a lot of countries. Remember I said society and values and traditions? And the only way these kids can get out of this abject poverty, one is through relationships, and I believe with God, but they also need to have education. They cherish education in this area of, in Uganda, like we cherish something that's completely trivial. They know the importance of education, and education isn't just facts and figures. It's the opportunity to grow as a human being, to become something that they can be called to do individually and not assigned to do, which is what their culture does. So we've, in America, in United States, in Canada, and in our first world countries, we've taken education, we put it on the platform of, hey, it's important. But guess what? We have a dropout rate in the United States of just unbelievable amounts. Our kids don't see the value of education. There's a difference between what's quality education, and we'll get into that later. But what was life like before kindergarten? Not what it is today. I encourage you to take a look if that strikes an interest for you. So remember that curriculum is a product of time. It mirrors the cultural diversity that's prevalent and valued today more than in the past. Our kids today can get information like this, right? It's all on technology and it's really fast. But what happens is they can find the information, but they're not necessarily remembering the information, right? So we have to have children repeat things over time to comprehend and retain the information, and not just find a way for Google and Siri to find it. Because I know you got 1- and 2-year-olds that can flip through a tablet like nobody's business. Why? They have memorized a pattern of what gets them to what they want to do. They've memorized a pattern, which is a math skill. But take that tablet away and have them do another math skill, and you'd be surprised at what they don't know yet. So what happens is we have what's called the pendulum. Pendulum is something that swings like this, okay? So for a long time, the education pendulum over here, and then we learned more data, and then it went here. And then we thought, oh, that didn't work very well, and then we go back here. So you always, part of being in these classes is to always learn new information as to where the education pendulum swings. Now, pendulum is usually on strategies and curriculum, but child development is pretty much right here, right in the center. How children develop is pretty much in the center. Now, what we're learning is like things like special needs, okay, like autism or ADHD or whatever the label is. We're learning more about what that looks like. So back in the day, autism was way over here. We couldn't even see it. We'd have pocket protectors and glasses, and they'd wear their high waters, and all them geeks or nerds or idiots or whatever. And then we learned that there's thousands and thousands and millions of kids that have this with sensory processing, and found out they're valuable in society, and we just have to learn the way they learn, right? So it's a product over time. And influences on curriculum decisions are exactly what we've said. They're your beliefs of how children learn based on past research and data. You've got to know child development. You have to know that play is an essential choice for children to participate in, and that your relationship with children is key. And so if you are a hot mess all the time, and there's things at home, or your boss is horrible, and you're crazy all the time, you're not in the moment. You're not present in the mindset of the moment of children that they need you for. And you're doing them a disservice. Somebody's paying you money to train the brain of their child. Holy crud, did you hear me? You have the brain of a human being in your hands, and they're paying you money, as little as it is, to do something with that. That should scare you to death and entice you to learn as much as you can about the field that we're in. By using what's called developmentally appropriate practices. Learn this word. Memorize it, embroider it into your brain. DAP, DAP, developmentally appropriate practices. The best place to learn all about this is the link below. Wait, here we go. The link on the side is NACCE. NACCE is the people, they're the agency that pretty much wrote the book in early education for the United States, okay, and in Canada. So you really want to be a part of NACCE. I'm part of FLACE. So there's NACCE as the state, as the country, FLACE is the state, and I'm part of that. And I wouldn't just say that if I didn't believe in what they do. I believe in what they do. There was for years where the pendulum was a mess that I backed away from them because they were not following what was best practice, but they're back dead center. So really encourage you to understand developmentally appropriate practice. It's what you teach, how you teach, based on early education milestones, based on the child, and based on the social context. Gee, didn't we just talk about that on all these past slides? Okay, so remember a time when you were a child and you really wanted to know something. What is it that you wanted to know about? Why was it important to you? And what did you learn? And how is that similar to what you did in school? Now, I know we don't have a lot of time to talk about this, so this is kind of one of those processing things. I wanted to learn to ride a bike because it was the only way I could get to my friend's house. All right, I really wanted to learn it. Why was it important? Because I could get out of my crazy house. I had two parents that fought all the time, and a bike got me out of the house. So I learned how to ride a bike. Now, who taught me? My dad helped me a lot. He had the back of the bike and helped push me along and things like that. It was great. And then I learned to ride a bike. And I rode that bike from like age 6 till I got my license when I was 16, 17. Okay, it was really important for me. And we talked about this. You've got to learn the theories. All right. I want you to go over this. I want you to look them up online. I want you to pull your old child development book out again and look at chapter 2. You got to know these guys. I'm not spending a lot of time on this because this is stuff you already should know. And if you don't already know it, you got to spend half an hour looking up these guys. And I say guys, but there is a girl. Maria Montessori was a powerful theorist, and we still use her Montessori ideologies now. You can also check out Sarah Smolanski. All right, that's another one that's studied on the stages of play. So there's a lot more. If you notice, Froebel's not in here. Okay, you have Pavlov, you have Skinner, you have Watson, that are all behavioral theorists in early ed and human development. So I don't have time to cover all this, but you have to know these guys and girls. All right, we've talked about that. It's the house. The foundation is the child. The square is the framework. Okay, remember we already talked about this. It's the curriculum and the learning environment. Reggio Emilia calls the learning environment the third teacher. Yeah, we'll talk more about that later on. And then you have to make sure you have time for kids to play. It's about timing too, isn't it? So how is curriculum organized? Well, in this case, in an integrated structure, there's usually a topic that we want to cover, right? We're going to say, all right, for the month of May, we're going to study spring, or June, we're going to do summer, right? It's this huge global topic. What drives me crazy is where people do like January and they do snow, and we live in Florida. Do you really think kids are going to have a full understanding of snow? Not really. I mean, you can make some snow cones, but it's not like you can go outside and build a snowman. You're going to, okay, let's go outside, and then it's, 80 degrees outside. But it's usually a topic of study that provides a focus for the curriculum. It's an umbrella for different developmental areas. And it contributes to children's growing awareness, skill, and having, listen to me, right here, direct and meaningful experiences of the world. Like, write that down, print the slide out, highlight it, stick it in your classrooms. Children must have a direct and meaningful experience with the world, because if it's not interesting and meaningful to them, they're not going to learn it. This is why you have some kids that are like, I'll learn everything. And you have other kids like, oh God, I don't want to do this, because it's not meaningful to them. All right? So we want to have a learner-centered classroom. I want to show you some examples. This is an infant room. You have some, with the pads, you have a lot of gross motor because they're all climbing on everything. You have the pillows in the back. I think those are a little too much pillows because babies, little guys get kind of lost. They don't have the muscle movement, but a soft area is really what that is. You have some toys. You have safety. You have your cribs for resting. You have personal space for their cubbies. If you look in the cubby space, they each have blankets there. It's a little sloppy put together, but generally they're there. Okay, you have parent information board. This is really for young children, right? This is like a twos area. I think this one's a little cramped, but sometimes you get the space you get. I'd love to see no tables. Other than eating, I'd love to see portable tables. I used to have portable tables in my classroom, and we would try to get rid of the tables for nap time, and we'd get rid of tables for activity time. Okay, the only time I would do that is if I have a teacher that really can't be on the floor. But if you can get rid of tables, get on the floor, that's where the kids are anyway. They have to have their eyes looking over whatever it is they're working on. Did you know that? Children have to have their hand and eyes in front of each other. So when you put them at the table, there's an angle. That's why they're always standing up at the table. And you're like, sit down, sit down. And they're like, well, I need to stand up because I can't see it. Not until later in age. Aha moment there, I saw it. All right, here's a 24 to 36 month. Just a basic overview. Every center is different. All your supplies are different. These are pretty much commercial toys. There's a typical 3 to 4's classroom. You have your designated learning centers, messy art area, dress up area, construction building area. Everything's labeled. Everything should be labeled. There should be pictures with words, not just words and not just pictures. I know they can't read yet. You know they can't read yet. But they need what's called environmental print. They have to be able to see the print with the picture to start putting those two ideas together. Repeat, repeat, repeat. Now, as you can see, what's interesting is as a child gets older, the room gets bigger because of their body size. My thing is I'd love to see a 2-year-old room this big because they end up running all over the place anyway. How about that as an integrated classroom for an infant? Compare that to the previous slide. This is about the sensory experiences, the warm lighting, the natural look of scarves and pine cones and metal canisters. Things that allow them the sensory experience. How about that for a 2-year-old room? With children's artwork displayed in frames and celebrated. And more natural colors to calm down the visual senses. See, there's no real, it's not cluttered. Less is more for children. They get overstimulated visually with all these bright reds and blues. How about that? How about mirrors on the wall? Making it look like home. Making it look like your living room at home and making it more home-like. Hanging things from the ceiling. Having live, healthy plants inside. How about that for pre-K 4 room? Do you see the difference? Do you see how this is child-related? So there's a book. Let's see if I can point to it. Nope. On stones. And there's rocks and sticks that they can create with. Yes, you don't just throw this in a classroom and say, hey, we're changing everything today. No, this is a slow process. You introduce new things. You teach the children respect for the items that they have there. You build a relationship with your child, then you build a relationship with the environment. And then there you get respect. You have better social emotional development. You have less tantrums and behavior issues. Yeah.